Hello everyone, welcome to part 3 of the Redux walkthrough tutorial on Turbo 360. In part 2 we set up a basic React project and a single component that shows a to-dos list where we maintained everything in the component state. In this part we're going to set up the Redux environment and connect the component to Redux so that all the items in the to-dos list will come from the Redux store rather than the component state. So again, to be clear, this is an oversimplified example. We certainly normally wouldn't use Redux in a project of this simplicity. It's really just meant to give you an idea of how Redux is organized and how the data flows through a Redux architecture. So yeah, that's it. Let's get into it. So here is where we left off last time in the Todo.js component, and then I'm going to cd into that, into the project. Run the dev server, go to localhost 3000, and here's what we have. I'm going to add one more item to the list just to make sure it still works. See, today's a football Sunday, so fantasy team, update fantasy team, and there it is. Okay, good. So this still works, and now, like I was saying in the intro, we have everything stored in state, and it works fine. But now it's time to move all this stuff to the Redux architecture, which we did set up, but we're not using. So let's see here. We're going to need to set up a reducer for these to-do items. Because remember what I said in the first video, the reducers are where all the data is really stored. A reducer is kind of like a sub-store. So we're going to want to set up a reducer for the to-do items. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So we go to these reducers directory, and then let's call it reduce to-do reducer. Okay, and then in here is where we set up all the actual organize the to-dos list. So here we're going to want the constants. Okay. Going to want to set up an initial state. And then the to-dos component has in its state something called an array called a list. So we really want to store that inside here. Except I'm not going to call it list. I'm just going to call it to-dos, which is going to be an empty array. And this will be the array of items on the to-do list. So go to the grocery, pick up laundry, things like that. The reducer is really a function, so we want to do export default. And the function takes a state, which is initialized as initial state, and the action. So remember what I said in the earlier video, actions are dispatched to reducers. So in this chart, actions are sent to reducers, and then the reducer receives them and decides what to do with the action. So here, this function is what gets called when the reducer receives an action, and then the action itself is an argument of the function. So here we set up a switch case. Always set up a default. So remember earlier I also said actions have types, and those types are defined in the constants. right here. So in our example, an action that we have so far is creating a to-do. Right, so we want to call that an action, create to-do item. And here's the string for that. So now this is an action type that can get dispatched to a reducer, which means this reducer should be prepared to receive it. So constants. And then for now, we're just going to do a console log and nothing else. So not much is going to happen. In fact, basically nothing's going to happen. We're just going to do a console log. But all we're doing here is confirming that the action has been received and that we have registered the type successfully. So that's done. So now we have to somehow have a way of dispatching the actual action. So that happens, of course, in the actions folder. So here we need the constants as well. And we're just going to set this up like a standard object, JavaScript. Let's see here. Create to-do item. This is a function. It can take a to-do argument, and then it returns an object with a type, which is going to be the constant, the type of the action, and then the data. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm creating the action. So this function right here is a little more than a liaison to the reducer. It's really just a sort of a messenger to the reducer, sending the reducer an action. This is an action. This whole JSON object is an action with a type. So it has to have a type. This is mandatory, this key. And the type is the action name. Right, so notice how this corresponds with the reducer constant that it's expecting on this end. And then beyond that, you can add whatever you want. So I'm just adding a data key, which is the actual to-do that's being created. And so this is the action, or sometimes called the action creator, for creating a to-do list item. So this will be dispatched to this. This will respond to it, and then just do a console log, hopefully. So we have our reducer, we have our action. Don't forget the next thing we need now is the store. So if we open up the store, we have to set this up. Let's see, let's go with sorry, I had to look it up for a second. I always forget these imports, so I just took it from another project. However, just take a moment to pause the video and copy all these imports from the Redux library and then the Redux thunk as well. So these are the minimum imports you need for creating a store in Redux. You should try and well, I guess shouldn't be hypocritical, so I didn't memorize this. So you're going to reuse this over and over again. So in general, you're going to just copy and paste this from another project. And then what I'm trying to say is this is non-specific code. This is code that's not specific to your project. However, now we got to set up code that is specific. So here I'm going to import the reducer that we created. So if you look at the reducer here, our to-dos reducer, we forgot to export it in the index. So in the reducer index, don't forget to do that. And then now we can export that into the store. So go back to your stores file and then export it right there. So now we have the to-do reducer in the store, which we will need. So then let's do a create okay, so let's have a create store functionality right here. And then let's do const reducers. This is a combine reducers. Okay, let me make sure I wrote that down correctly. I did not. So to do okay, so here we're combining the reducers. So remember what I said earlier is that this part right here in the diagram is a little bit misleading. It's usually a handful of reducers, 5, 6, 7 reducers. So all of those reducers would come together here. They get combined here. So you would import, like 5 or 6 over here, and then combine them all in here. And the name of the reducer in the actual project is going to be just to do, and that's it. And then here we're creating the store, and then I'm just going to return the store in this function. And I'm going to make the store a variable out here, so I can do it like that. Okay. Alright, that should be good for now, and then I'm going to create another function called current store so that we can just return the store. So that we only need to initialize it once. Okay, so here we're actually creating the store using the create store function from the Redux library. Don't worry about this thunk middleware. In fact, it won't really even come up in this video, but it will come up in subsequent videos, so make sure you at least remember to do that. And then the store, like I said, is really just a collection of reducers. You see that here? So we're grabbing all the reducers and we're using that to create the store. And then we're returning the store right here. So the next thing we need to do is actually connect the entire project to the Redux environment. Right now this project is still not connected to Redux itself. So if I run this, it should work. Turbo. Like nothing should break, but it won't be connected to Redux. So it's just sort of code that's lying around not doing anything. So to connect it, we have to go to the actual application index all the way to the top. So right here, the entry point. And we have to import a component called the provider from React Redux. This component literally combines not combines, but it puts the Redux architecture in your project, or more accurately, it puts your project in the React architecture. And then we need the store because in the Redux architecture, my apologies. And then we need the store because hold on. Every Redux project needs a store. That's why. Okay, that's good to go. So now to connect it to Redux, we just put the whole project inside a provider. However, don't forget, every Redux project needs a store. So we're going to do store, and then the store really has two functions, create store and current store. At this juncture, there is no current store, so we create the store like that. So this code right here connects your to-dos component inside the Redux architecture. And so now this project is inside of Redux. So if I run the server, it shouldn't crash, which is good. And now we have sort of access to the Redux environment. So that's good. So now we can turn this off and start hooking the to-dos component to the Redux store, converting it into a smart component, converting it into a container. So in the diagram, we are right here on where it says page. This is the to-dos component. So we're about to connect the page to the store. That's going to happen next now. So if we go to the to-dos component, we need to import a function called connect from React Redux. And then down at the bottom, we need to set up two variables, two references, state to props. So I guess two functions really. So const dispatch to props. Dispatch. Okay, we're going to deal with the state to props first. So the state to props is your connection to the actual store. This state argument right here is the Redux store. So by setting up this function right here, we're going to connect the component to the store by doing the following: running the connect function down here and passing in the state to props and then the dispatch to props. So now this is a connected component. So this is now officially a smart component or a container component. So then here, if we run the dev server again, hopefully nothing crashes, which is the case. So nothing is crashing, so that's good. So now we are ready to actually use the Redux store properties and whatnot. So if you recall, in the store, in the reducers, we have a to-do reducer. So we have access to that here. Oh, sorry, like that. So this property reference right here is a direct reference to that right there. Okay, so this is connecting the current to-do reducer to the component. And then we also had a function called create to do. Well, I'm gonna get to this later. Let's hold off on this for now. So let's now take the list right here. Right, let's get rid of this. Let's clear it out. So if we clear out the list, obviously when I reload, it's going to be an empty list. Oh wow, I forgot to run Webpack this whole time. So we want to run Webpack on watch. That was dumb. Okay, luckily everything worked anyway, but that was a pretty scary moment there because basically what happened was, since I didn't run Webpack, I wasn't testing anything this whole time. So luckily everything was right on the first shot. So okay, so here we are. We have nothing on the list because we removed the elements, the items, right? Obviously it's an empty array. So we want to, the idea here is we want to render those items from the reducer right here, the to-dos, right? So let's get those items in here instead. Basically, I'm just swapping it out from the component into the store. That's what's supposed to happen, right? So if we reload the page, it's not going to work. And let's just make sure Webpack is running. Yeah, it is. Good. Okay, why not? Because we're not referencing the reducer at all. So we want to get rid of this entirely, right? That should be gone altogether, right? But now keep in mind, everywhere we had a list reference, that's going to crash. So we definitely want to comment out this right here, right? Because this state list doesn't exist anymore, right? So we definitely want to take care of that, which means right here, that's not going to work either, this state list. So what we want to do is grab the to-dos from the reducer. The question is, how do you do that? Well, down here in state to props, this function is named that way for a reason. The reducer to-do list, right? Oh, sorry. The reducer to-do list right here is inside this reducer, right? So we can say to-dos. Let me rephrase that. So this entire reducer effectively becomes a property on this component. That's why it's called state2props. So we have access to this entire reducer as a property on the component itself. And that property is called to-do. So we can do this.props. I'm going to call this list. This.props.to-do. This is the reducer. And then we have an element called to-dos. So this naming is a little bit off, but this is the list from the reducer right here. So now if I just reference that list, I should be back to where I was before. This should now render the items from here, but they're coming from the reducer now, not from the component state. That's what should happen. So let's check in on Webpack. Everything looks good. So if I reload, back in business, right? So now if I add another item to the reducer, and reload, that's now coming from the reducer. So that worked. That was successful. You may notice that I'm checking Webpack periodically because you want to get in the habit of doing that. Because if you make a mistake anywhere along the way, Webpack will crash, and it'll tell you you messed something up. So for example, if I do something like this is a syntax error, right? This is invalid JavaScript. Webpack should be crashing right around now, and here it is, right? So you want to check Webpack, regularly if you run it on watch, so that if you make a mistake, you catch it first before testing your code. So you can just put that back, and then back in business. Okay, so that's it. So now we've successfully combined or connected the to-dos component to the reducer. So now it is truly a React Redux project. The next thing we're going to do is get rid of this. Now we have left out the add to-do, right? So now we want to run that through the action reducer sequence. So in the next video, we're going to set that up. We're going to take the add to-do and run it through the action reducer sequence so that it creates a new to-do list and inserts it here, and then it adds it over here, bringing us back to the functionality we originally had, but however this time it's running through Redux. So again, I want to be clear, this is sort of overkill for using React Redux. I certainly wouldn't do it for something this simple, but for a Redux demonstration, this is a good way to get a good handle around Redux conceptually. So right now our to-dos component, which is right here, is now successfully connected to the store. So it is truly a smart component now. And in the next video, we're going to create this sequence. We're going to create a to-do, which will go to the action creator, which will dispatch it to the reducer. The reducer will do its thing, update the state, and then re-render. Okay, so that's coming up in the next video. So hopefully you got everything to work in this video, and thanks for watching.